The train wheels screeched against the tracks, slowing into the station with a cloud of dust and smoke. It was the spring of 1887, and Clara Whitlow sat still as a statue in the wooden passenger car, gloved hands resting neatly in her lap. She wore a modest traveling dress, powder blue with a faded lace collar, and her brown hair was tied back in a ribbon she'd pressed flat with warm stones the night before. Her boots were scuffed from walking station to station, but her posture remained upright, composed, dignified. She was 29, and though not yet old, in the world of mail-order brides, she might as well have been antique. Clara clutched a folded letter, in her handbag, the edges worn soft from rereading. The handwriting was deliberate and kind. "Miss Whitlow, your words bring light to my days. If you'll come west, I swear to build us a home. Yours in hope, Thomas Greeley." She had believed him. The conductor called out, "Dustin! Next stop, Dustin!" Clara stood. Her knees ached from the long journey, but she ignored them, stepping off the train with as much grace as she could manage. The platform was quiet, just a few townsfolk, 2 boys chasing a dog, and a man standing. Near the water tower, she recognized him instantly from the photograph he'd sent. Tall, angular, with a proud jaw and a wool vest faded by years under the sun. That was Thomas Greeley, the man who had written to her with warmth and patience through the harsh winter months. The man who said he had a cabin, land, and a need for companionship, maybe even love. Clara gave a soft smile and walked toward him, smoothing the front of her dress. He didn't smile back. He glanced at her once, eyes flicking up and down. Not cruelly, but critically. "You're Clara?" he asked. "Yes," she said, voice steady. He looked away, scratched his chin. "You didn't mention no children." Clara's heart went still in her chest. I didn't think it was necessary to include," she said quietly. "You're Barren, then?" The word sliced like a blade. Clara's eyes darted to the side. A shopkeeper paused to watch them. A young girl tugged her mother's skirt and whispered. "I had a fever when I was 23, Clara admitted, her voice a whisper. "The doctor said it left me unable to—" Thomas raised a hand. Not to strike, just to stop the words. He took one more look at her careful dress, her slim frame, the hope in her eyes, and shook his head. "I can't build a family with a woman who can't bear children," he said. "I need sons, heirs. I'm sorry, but this was a mistake." And just like that, he turned and walked away. Clara didn't chase him. She didn't cry. Not then. She simply stood there, her carpetbag at her feet, her ribbon catching in the breeze like a flag of surrender. Minutes passed. A boy threw a stone into the road. A woman buying apples from a cart stared at her openly. The wind picked up dust and carried it across the platform. She sat on the bench, pulled the letter from her bag again, and read it slowly. Though she already knew every word, even the kindest handwriting can lie. Night fell with no further train scheduled and no place to go. She walked to the edge of the depot building and sat against the brick wall. Her hands trembled as she picked at the worn gloves. Her back ached. Her pride ached worse. Inside, a man in a wide-brimmed hat watched her from the far end of the platform. He had said nothing during the scene, but he had seen it all. His name was Sam Callister, and he would not be walking away. Sam Callister didn't speak much, and folks around Dustin had long since stopped expecting him to. He did his trading at sunrise, rode into town only when he had to, and kept his head down even then. But that didn't mean he didn't notice things, especially things like the woman who'd been left behind on the platform. He'd seen it happen from his post by the blacksmith's barn. Close enough to hear the rejection, too far to intervene. Something about the quiet way she held her chin afterward stayed with him all day. Not pride exactly. Something gentler, like someone refusing to fall apart where others could see. By sunset, she was still there. The evening wind rolled in across the prairie, tugging at the hem of her dress as she sat on the bench outside the depot, arms folded around herself. Most of the town had gone home, Lamplight spilled from a few windows, but no one paid her any mind now, except him. Sam stood for a while longer beneath the overhang, chewing slowly on a toothpick. Finally, he pulled his hat down low, crossed the road, and approached the bench. Where she sat, she didn't look up, not even when he cleared his throat. "Evenin'," he said. Clara stiffened slightly, then turned her face toward him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She was trying to be brave. "I saw what happened earlier," he continued, keeping his voice low. "Wasn't right." Clara offered a tight smile. "You don't need to concern yourself, sir. I'll find something. Or somewhere." Sam glanced toward the wide prairie horizon. "There's not many somewheres out here, not unless you know someone." "I don't." He shifted on his boots. "You hungry?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "I've got stew on the fire," he said. "And a spare room. It's not much, but it's warm. You're welcome to stay the night." Clara blinked at him. "Why would you offer that?" He scratched his chin, unsure how to answer. "'Cause I've known what it feels like to have no place to go." A long pause. Then softly, "Is it far?" "Couple miles by wagon. Got it hitched behind the livery." She studied him for a long moment. His weathered face, the quiet, honesty in his eyes. Something about him felt grounded, unhurried, like he'd once been broken too. "All right," she said. "Just for the night." The wagon ride was silent, save for the occasional call of crickets and the creak of the wooden frame. The moon was high when they reached the Callister homestead, a modest log house tucked between cottonwoods and a wide stretch of fenced pasture. A single oil lamp glowed in the front window. Clara stepped down and followed Sam inside. The cabin was clean but sparse. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a soft orange hue across the floor. A pot of stew simmered nearby, and the smell made Clara's stomach clench in gratitude. A small girl sat curled in a blanket by the fire, a book open in her lap. She had Sam's dark hair and cautious eyes. "Emma," Sam said gently, "this is Miss Clara. She's staying the night." The girl nodded once but didn't speak. Clara offered a small wave. "Hello there." Emma blinked slowly, then returned to her book. "She don't talk much," Sam explained as he handed Clara a bowl. "Takes time to warm to folks." Clara nodded. "I understand." They ate in near silence, punctuated only by the crackle of wood and the soft clink of spoons against ceramic. The stew was simple: potatoes, carrots, rabbit. But it was warm and filling. After supper, Sam showed her to the spare room. The bed was narrow, the quilt homemade, but to Clara it felt like luxury. A door she could close, a roof that didn't shake in the wind. She turned to Sam before he left the doorway. "Thank you," she said, the words fragile but sincere. He gave a slight nod. "You rest easy, Miss Clara," and with that, he closed the door behind him. Alone in the quiet, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. In the span of a single day, she had been promised a life, abandoned, and offered a fire by a stranger with kind eyes. She didn't know what tomorrow held. But for tonight, the shadows had stepped back, and for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. The days passed slowly on the Callister homestead, like the river just beyond the cottonwoods, steady, deliberate, with a quiet sort of rhythm. What began as one night turned into 2, then 5, then nearly a month. Clara never asked to stay, and Sam never asked her to leave. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It simply made room for something neither of them dared to name. In the mornings, Clara would rise early and make coffee, sometimes beating Sam to the stove. She swept the floors, patched Sam's shirts without being asked, and scrubbed the pans until they gleamed. Sam, in turn, repaired the broken leg of an old chair she favored and built a proper clothesline outside so she wouldn't have to hang linens over the firewood rack anymore. Emma was the quietest of them all. She rarely spoke, but she watched Clara with deep, solemn eyes, always studying, always judging, until one morning, when Clara handed her a freshly baked biscuit and said gently, "Would you like honey on yours, sweet girl?" Emma paused, nodded, once and then, just barely, smiled. Sam saw it from the barn door. He didn't say a word, but when he caught Clara's eye, something softened between them, like frost melting off a window pane. That week, Clara began reading to Emma each evening. She found an old book of fables in a crate under the bed, dusty and yellowed, but the words still sang. She read slowly, enunciating each line, letting Emma sit close with her head against Clara's shoulder. Sam watched from the porch, his arms folded, a cigarette unlit between his fingers. The three of them fell into a rhythm. Sam handled the fields and livestock, Clara managed the home, and Emma, without anyone saying it, began to bloom. One afternoon, while mending a tear in Sam's work shirt, Clara paused and looked out the window. Emma was playing with a stick in the dirt, drawing shapes in silence. Sam sat on the porch step cleaning a bridle. His shirt clung damp to his shoulders in the heat. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said softly, stepping outside. He looked up, squinting against the sun. "Course." "Why haven't you asked me why I stayed?" Sam leaned back, set the bridle aside. "Didn't think it was polite." "I stayed because I didn't know where else to go," she admitted. "And then I stayed because, for a moment, I didn't feel so useless." He frowned. "You're not." Clara laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "That's not what Thomas Greeley thought. He wanted children. I couldn't give him any. I had scarlet fever when I was younger. It ruined something in me. Something women are supposed to have." She looked down at her hands. "I don't belong on a ranch. I can't give you what your wife gave you. I can't give Emma siblings." Sam didn't speak right away. Instead, he stood slowly and looked out at the field where the wind bent the wheat in waves. "My wife gave me Emma," he said quietly, "and then she left me with silence. You gave that girl her smile back. That's more than I've been able to do in years." Clara's throat tightened. "Still, maybe I've overstayed." She turned toward the barn where her old carpet bag still sat tucked in the corner. She hadn't touched it in weeks, but now it suddenly felt like it was calling her again. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She lay awake, watching moonlight pour through the window, wondering what life she had the right to claim, wondering if staying here was stealing something that wasn't hers. The next morning, just after dawn, Clara packed her bag. She folded her dress neatly, left a note on the table, and walked to the front gate as quietly as she could. Emma was still sleeping. The sun had barely crested the ridge. She reached the gatepost and found Sam already there. He leaned on the rail like he'd been waiting. "You don't have to go," he said, his voice calm. "I should," Clara replied. "This isn't mine. None of this is mine." He stepped closer. "It is if you want it to be." She looked at him, searching for uncertainty in his face. There was none. "You mean that?" she asked. "I mean every word." Clara's eyes stung and her hands trembled slightly around the handle of her bag. "I don't know how to be anything more than a burden, Sam." "Then you ain't been watching yourself," he said. "You're the reason this house feels alive again." Behind them, the front door creaked open. Emma stood barefoot on the step, blanket clutched to her chest, watching. Clara turned and met her gaze. Emma stepped down, walked over, and slipped her small hand into Clara's. No words, just warmth. Clara's bag hit the ground with a soft thud. The first time Sam brought Clara into town as something more than a shadow in the wagon seat. The sun was high and the wind sharp with the promise of an early frost. Dustin, Wyoming wasn't a bustling place, but it had its watchers, those who made it their business to know everyone else's. Sam reined the horses near the general store and helped Clara down with a gentleman's quiet respect. Emma trailed, close beside them, her small hand tucked into Clara's without anyone making a fuss of it. Inside the store, as Sam fetched supplies, Clara handed the shopkeeper a small list and spoke with soft precision. "This is Clara Whitlow," Sam said, at last, addressing the room more than the man behind the counter. "She's a friend, Helping out at the ranch?" The clerk gave a polite nod. A woman near the bolts of calico fabric raised a brow and whispered to her friend, "Isn't that the one Greeley left at the station?" Clara heard it. She didn't flinch. She thanked the clerk for his time and held her head just a little higher as they walked out. The whispers didn't stop after that. At the post office, they echoed. At church, they hummed behind backs. In the saloon, they turned, cruel. Still, Clara didn't shrink. She began spending her Thursdays at the schoolhouse, teaching letters and numbers to the youngest of Dustin's children. It wasn't an official position, but the overworked teacher, Mrs. Fowley, welcomed the help, especially when Clara brought fresh cornbread and patience in equal measure. Emma walked her there each time and waited by the door. The children adored her. And slowly, a few parents began to nod their greetings instead of turning away. But not everyone welcomed change. Nate Elwood was the sort of man who took pleasure in rot. Rot in fences, rot in reputations, rot in women left unguarded. He owned a small patch of sour land outside of town and spent more time drinking than mending his fields. He found Clara by the well behind the store one afternoon, filling a bucket before heading home. "Well, look what the wind blew back in," he drawled, tipping his hat with a grin that didn't touch his eyes. "Thought you'd packed your little carpet bag and run back east, barren and broken." Clara didn't respond. She kept pouring. Nate stepped closer. "You reckon Callister knows what he's getting, taking in used-up goods?" She turned sharply. "You're drunk?" "Only on the truth, sweetheart." Sam arrived then, stepping down from the wagon just as Nate took another step toward Clara. He saw her rigid posture, the steel she was trying to hold. He saw the curl of Nate's lip, and something in him snapped. The punch landed squarely on Nate's jaw, sending him sprawling in the dirt. The street went silent. Sam didn't speak. He didn't raise his voice. He only turned, took Clara gently by the arm, and walked her back to the wagon as though the dust and blood on Nate's lip weren't even worth the glance. They didn't speak of it until later that night. The house was quiet. Emma had gone to bed early, tired from her studies. Clara stood by the fire, brushing out her hair, her expression unreadable. Sam sat at the table, his hat in his hands. "You didn't have to do that," she said at last. "I know. I've had men say worse. I know that too." She looked at him then. "You never struck me as the fighting kind." "I ain't." He paused, then added, "Wasn't." Silence hung between them. Then Clara sat across from him, folding her hands. "Why did you?" He looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing something deep and private. "My wife, May, died giving birth to Emma," he said finally. "She was strong, brighter than me in every way. And when she was gone, the world got quieter, not peaceful, just empty." Clara said nothing, just listened. "I never thought I'd feel anything again. Not anger, not pride, not love." He looked up, and his voice cracked just slightly. "But today, when I saw him speaking to you that way, when I saw your hands shaking but your chin high, I felt something break loose. I realized I hadn't been empty. I'd just been waiting." Clara's eyes welled, but she didn't look away. "I don't know what this is," Sam said softly. "But I know I haven't had peace in years, and now, with you and Emma under this roof, it feels like breathing again." Clara stood, walked to him, and placed her hand on his. "I wasn't looking for a family," she whispered. "Neither was I," he replied. "But maybe one found us anyway." The wind had been fierce that day, dry and sharp like it carried splinters. Clara noticed it first, the way the air snapped instead of sighing, the way the skies held their breath. Dust clung to everything, and by late afternoon the heat had grown brittle. Sam was out mending the west fence when Emma's screams shattered the quiet. Clara ran outside just in time to see thick black smoke curling from the barn roof. "Fire!" she yelled, her voice rising with terror. Emma stood frozen by the well, eyes wide. Clara bolted to her first, scooping her up and yelling toward the fields. "Sam!" The barn crackled with heat as she set Emma down and grabbed a nearby bucket, dousing the girl's head and shawl. "Stay here," Clara ordered, voice shaking but sure. She turned and sprinted for the barn. Inside, flames licked the beams. The scent of burning hay stung her nose. The goats bleated in panic. One stall held a terrified mare pawing at the ground. Clara threw open the gate and shouted, waving her arms until the horse bolted past her out into the yard. She stumbled forward, coughing, eyes watering. Another goat, then a calf. Behind her she heard pounding footsteps. Sam, finally. He ran, straight into the barn with his coat held over his mouth, grabbing tools, flinging open gates. Then there was a crack. A rafter above them split with a hiss of sparks. "Sam!" she cried. He turned just in time for it to fall. It missed his head, but struck his shoulder, slamming him to the ground. Clara rushed to him, ignoring the embers biting her arms. She heaved the beam off him with all the strength fear could summon, dragging him by his arms until they reached the barn door. Together, coughing and gasping, they fell into the dirt as the flames swallowed the roof behind them. That night, Clara sat beside Sam in the main room. His shoulder was bruised badly, his side scorched red and raw. She'd cleaned and bandaged him, laid cool cloths across his brow. He drifted in and out of consciousness, fevered and murmuring. Emma refused to leave his side at first, but exhaustion overtook her. Clara carried the girl to her own bed, humming softly. When Emma clung to her neck, still half asleep, she whispered something. "Don't go, Ma." Clara froze. Her breath caught in her throat, and her arms tightened around the child. She laid her gently down and sat beside the bed, brushing hair from Emma's flushed cheek. The girl sighed and turned, the words still echoing like music in the room. Ma Clara didn't sleep that night. She returned to the firelit main room, keeping vigil beside Sam. His face twitched in dreams, sweat beading on his temples. She wiped it gently, changed the cloth, whispered nonsense just to fill the silence. At dawn, the sky grew pale and soft. The world smelled of ash and morning dew. Sam stirred. His eyes blinked open, unfocused. Then they found her. "You stayed," he rasped. "Of course I did." He tried to sit, winced, and she steadied him. "She called you Ma," he whispered. "I heard it." Clara's lips trembled. "I wasn't sure if you would." He nodded, slowly. His hand found hers. "I lost May in one night," he said. "But it's taken years to feel whole again. You walked in with your quiet hands and stubborn heart and gave my girl back her laughter." Clara looked away, overwhelmed. "You gave me something too," he said. She met his eyes. "I don't have a ring. I don't have much of anything. You have a home," she whispered. He smiled. "I want to share it. Not just for now, not just because we survived, but because you belong here, Clara, with us." A pause. Then, "You, me, and Emma. We'll be a family." Clara's eyes filled. She reached for his hand, then placed it gently over her heart. "Yes," she said. "We already are." The sun had barely broken the horizon when the preacher cleared his throat, Bible in hand, and began to speak. The wedding was held in the field just beyond the ashes of the old barn, where wildflowers had started blooming again through the charred soil. The air was cool, still kissed by night, and dew clung to the hem of Clara's homemade dress. She'd fashioned it from old curtains and lace Sam had found tucked in a trunk. It didn't shine or shimmer, but it flowed when she moved, and the blue thread she'd sewn into the hem glinted when it caught the light. Sam stood beside her in a clean shirt and freshly oiled boots. He had shaved that morning, the first time in years. His daughter Emma stood between them, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she'd gathered herself. There were no pews, just a handful of neighbors who had come without judgment. Mrs. Fowley from the schoolhouse, the blacksmith and his quiet wife. Even the shopkeeper who had once whispered about Clara offered her a smile now. No one mentioned Thomas Greeley. No one called her Barren. Not anymore. After the I-do's were spoken, After the preacher declared them husband and wife beneath the spreading cottonwoods, Emma took Clara's hand and whispered, "You look like someone out of a storybook." Clara smiled and squeezed her hand. "So do you, sweet girl." Sam didn't kiss her in front of the crowd. He simply looked at her the way men look when they've walked through fire and come out the other side with something worth keeping. Later, in the quiet of the new morning, Sam whispered against her ear, "We'll build something. From the ground up. Together." And so they did. The new barn went up slowly but solidly. Sam hammered the beams. Clara painted signs and stitched sacks. Emma named every post, every board, and every creature that wandered through. Together they raised orphaned lambs brought in from neighboring ranches. Clara fed them from bottles with steady hands. Emma learned how to hold them against her chest, murmuring nonsense words that calmed their trembling bodies. Sam watched them both from the doorway more than once, wiping his hands on his jeans and wondering how he'd ever lived without them. When summer came, Clara taught Emma to ride. She wasn't an expert herself, but Sam stood nearby, giving soft instruction and steadying both horse and child until confidence bloomed. Clara clapped and laughed when Emma trotted 5 full paces without help. That laugh echoed through the valley. It became the sound of home. The townsfolk noticed. They still whispered, but now it was something different, something less cruel. "She runs that place like it's hers," one said at the store. "She's got the girl reading chapter books," another added. Even Nate Elwood, bruised and quieter since the punch, muttered, "Didn't think she had it in her, but maybe she did." The woman once dismissed as barren was no longer spoken of as lacking. She was the one who healed the Callisters. Clara didn't seek the town's approval. She didn't try to change their minds. She simply lived, showed up, gave more than she took, planted things that would bloom later. And every night as the sun went down behind the ridgeline, she and Sam would sit on the porch and watch Emma chase the dogs through the grass. They didn't talk much on those evenings. They didn't need to. Peace, when earned, makes few demands. The years rolled on like the river near the cottonwoods, steady, sometimes wild, but always forward. Clara Callister, once left at a train station with nothing but a letter and a hope, now sat each morning with a steaming mug and a journal in her lap. She had started writing not long after the wedding, at first to Emma, then to herself, then to women like her. The pages were filled with lessons: how to bake bread over an open hearth, how to read a man's silence, how to patch worn soles when there's no new leather, and how to stitch your own heart back together when life tears it at the seams. Most of all, the journal spoke of surviving the West as a woman who'd been told she was too late, too barren, too broken, and how all of that had turned out to be a lie. Every Thursday, Clara welcomed other mail-order brides into the schoolhouse, some newly arrived, others struggling with loneliness and dust and the sharp ache of homesickness. She taught them how to write their names, balance ledgers, and boil bitter roots into medicine. She brought stories, not just instructions. Stories of how to build something from nothing, how to grow roots in rocky soil. And in time, the schoolhouse grew fuller, not just with women, but with babies on hips and children chasing chickens in the yard. Clara never bragged. She simply gave what she had, and what she had, it turned out, was more than enough. Emma was 10 now, full of questions and fire. She read faster than Clara could keep up, rode faster than Sam preferred, and had taken to drawing elaborate family portraits that always included Clara in the center, not beside them, not behind them, in the center. Sam had softened with time, not weaker, just warmer. He smiled more. He touched Clara's hand in public now, and sometimes in quiet moments, he would press a kiss to her temple and whisper, "You saved more than just this ranch." The adoption happened in early spring, when the earth was thawing and the sky smelled like rain. The orphan train came through Dustin twice a year, and that morning Clara felt something stir in her chest before it even arrived. She and Sam didn't go with expectations. They just showed up. That's when they saw him, a quiet boy with dark eyes and a face too serious for his 7 years. His name was Henry, and he didn't speak for 2 days. Clara didn't press him. She simply laid a quilt at the foot of a small bed beside Emma's and read stories aloud each night with the door open. On the third night, Henry padded into the main room and climbed silently into Clara's lap. She held him until he fell asleep. Sam looked on from his chair, one hand over his mouth, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Their home grew a little fuller, and so did Clara's heart. She kept the journal going, page after page, writing late at night after the children were asleep. She wrote by lamplight. Beside Sam's slow breathing, her words soft but certain, she didn't need to write how she felt. It was in everything, each quilt folded, each dinner served, each kiss placed on a sleepy forehead. But still, she wrote, "They once said I was empty. But I have never known a love so vast, so full, as the one that grew from this land, from these hands, from this chosen life." One evening, as golden light spilled across the horizon, Clara tucked Emma and Henry into bed. Emma had braided flowers into her hair that day and insisted on keeping them. Henry held his new drawing close, 2 stick figures and a tall woman, between them, smiling. "Good night, Mama," Emma said, her voice soft and full. Henry echoed, "Night, Ma." Clara kissed them both, pulled the quilt to their chins, and closed the door gently behind her. She walked out to the porch, where Sam waited with 2 mugs in hand. They sat in their usual chairs, watching the horizon as the sun sank low, painting the sky with the same colors that once shimmered in Clara's curtain-made dress. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The breeze was soft, the land quiet, and the home full. She was once seen as empty, but in truth, she had enough love to fill a whole home.